Hey guys, it's rare that I put gameplay over video anymore. I usually don't even talk about games for the most part, but I wanted to talk about what made DriveClub so popular, why DriveClub, for many reasons, was many people and millions of people bought DriveClub. It is one of the best-selling PS4 exclusives to date, and Evolution Studios made a game that, again, wasn't very good, but or in many reviewer standards, but was very well acclaimed or very popular within the community on PS4. And it's very simple, right? The racing infrastructure or the racing community that we used to have, right? If you look back in the 90s and even in the mid 2000s, you'd have these arcade racers that were just filling up store shelves. You could buy Test Drive, you could buy Burnout, you could buy all these different, and then of course you have all the bargain bin games, right? Like the Ford Racing and just so many different brands that were just out there. And Ridge Racer, for example, right? And you had all these different types of games, not just arcade racers, but you had arcade racers that dealt into drifting, arcade racers that were open world, arcade racers that were underground street racing games. You had all these different genres. You had off-road arcade racers, and they were all just fun experiences. Some of them could be very boring and bland when it came to control scheme and overall driving, but each had their own thing to do, and it really gave the racing experience and the racing genre a lot to deal with. There was such a playground of games, really, from the PlayStation 1, PlayStation 2 era, particularly that's the 6 and the 7th, the 6 and the 5th, 6th, and the 7th generation, because of course even in the 7th generation you still had that lineup of, you could see Burnout on PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360, you could get Ridge Racer, you could get Test Drive, but it was the unlimited open world racing game. You could get Forza, and then you could get the simulators of Gran Turismo, Grid, for example. You had all of these different all these different game studios making all these different racing games. As a fan of racing games myself, I've seen this happen, and you look at PS4, and at the time, and even now, there's just not many games. I mean, there's a game called Split Second on PlayStation 3, Xbox 360. I think it made it on the PS3 as well. And that game is a fun, destructive game. It's simple. It's an arcade racer. The cars are designed very well. It's one of the sharpest looking games on that console, and it doesn't have a sequel because Disney isn't going to continue making games anymore. They shut down Black Rock Studios because of the recession, and during the recession, and now we don't have that game. That's just one example, right? But like, that's just an oddball game that was in the back that people remember. It's popular, and it was made for the 7th generation. In the 8th generation, we haven't had that, and what you're seeing now is just that, Forza Horizon, for example, is so popular every time it comes out. Forza Horizon 2 and Forza Horizon 3, of course, expectedly will be extremely popular because there isn't a market out there anymore. There is a market, but there aren't many games out there anymore. You don't see this bevy of racing games. They're not around anymore. So whenever we see one, we clamor for it. We go crazy for it. That's why Forza Horizon 3 and Forza Horizon 2 are just so popular now. And they already were, but that whenever we see that on either on an advertisement or just anywhere, it's just like, man, there's a racing game that I can sink my teeth into finally. And so when DriveClub came out, and that was 2014, and I covered that very much on my old channel, Digital Gamers Network. It was supposed to come out in the spring, and it came out in the fall. I looked at that time schedule. It looked like it was coming out alongside The Crew and many other games. It was surprising because at that time you had actually 3 games, I think, that were coming out. You had Need for Speed Rivals, or what was it? Which game was that? Was it? I presumed there would be a Need for Speed, but in 2014, I believe there was no Need for Speed that year. And then I presumed, and The Crew, I presume, was also going to be a game. So what we're seeing is that there are a few racing games out there, and that's it. So when The Crew came out and that had sour reviews, The Crew is basically a giant MMO for racing, and that's great. That's a new take, and we need that, and people love it, and there's a huge community that loves The Crew. There are a lot of people that hate The Crew, but there's a lot of people that love The Crew. But then if you look at DriveClub is one of the few games that just dives into being a simple racing game. It's just an arcade racer. There There aren't power-ups, there aren't boost mechanics. It's a racing game through and through, and we haven't had that in a while. Like, I mean, I'm sure there were many of them you probably can find them on PlayStation 3, you can find them on PlayStation 2, and definitely can find them on PlayStation 2, you can definitely find them on PlayStation 1, but on PlayStation 4, you're not going to find that. You won't find just a standard arcade racer. You can jump into Forza Motorsport and have a simulated experience, a simulation point by point, but if you don't want that, and you just want the arcade racing experience, it's not around anymore, and that pains me to say. I did not expect that when PlayStation 4 was unveiled on February 20th, 2013, that I would be standing here recording this video saying MotorStorm isn't on PlayStation 4 because they shut down the developer. There's no Wipeout. There's no developer working on a Wipeout game because Studio Liverpool was shut down. There's no Mod Nation Racers because Sony just doesn't find any effort in putting one in right now. There's no Twisted Metal game expected to release on PlayStation 4 because there just isn't an interest in Sony to put one out there. The only game that's really coming out is Gran Turismo, and I love Gran Turismo, but there's no other massive title that's coming out. I don't see Test Drive coming out anytime soon. I don't see any of the Burnout is, of course, there's nothing really in terms of Burnout from what we're hearing, and they're just small rumblings. But there's just no standard just arcade racer experience, and that's why DriveClub stuck in so well. That's why so many people loved it. That's why I loved it. I think that it's literally the best racing game you can buy right now on PlayStation 4, hands down. Visually, it's beautiful, and I think that's all we were expecting. That's all we wanted. We wanted to see that great, fun racing experience where you can drive a Ferrari down this beautiful coastline through this beautiful coastline on a sunny day, on a rainy day, in 21st century graphics, on graphics that we hadn't seen before, because that's the dream, right? I mean, that was the dream, and we finally see that on DriveClub. So, that's pretty simple. If you guys really are wondering why DriveClub did so well, that's plain and simple what happened. The racing genre is so limping along. There's just not much to offer here, and I understand that there are many independent developers going out working on things that are great, and until independent developers are really thought of as regal and reserved and put up there alongside these giant developers, I think that they're every time that we see a game that looks like it's on PlayStation 3 level graphics, it gets attacked. And I mean, the fault is that there is just no middle tier developer anymore, and it really has destroyed the racing scene, because I was expecting Hummer Badlands by now. If you guys don't know, Hummer Badlands was on PlayStation 2. It was a cheesy little arcade Hummer off-road game. I was expecting something like that by now on PlayStation 4. I was expecting a Test Drive by now on PlayStation 4. I was expecting, as a kid, and seeing all these racing games, the clear fact that all we have is Trackmania, Need for Speed Rivals, Need for Speed 2015. All we have are 2 Need for Speed titles, The Crew, DriveClub, and Trackmania. I think that those are the only roundup ones that are. And if you want to really mention the NASCAR one, you can. But I think those are the main ones that are actually there on PlayStation 4. And then if you really want to go to Xbox, that's why I've been looking at Xbox, because they actually they're committing year over year to new racing experiences when the world isn't actually putting out any big racers, and they see the potential of that. But I really wish they were going that there was. I never pictured this, and it sucks, but. Yeah, the racing genre is empty. It's not there. It's limping. It's gone. It's nearly gone, except for the exclusive developers and the third-party developers that are strong enough that really want to commit. And that sucks, but that's what we're at right now. That's where we are, and I don't think we're ever going to get back to that place where we can actually see 10 different games that are doing something similar, but all very different. Because I'll tell you one more story. I was playing Street Racing Syndicate, which is on PlayStation 2, and that game is bland as hell. It's made by Namco. The game is bland as hell. But what they do with the user interface is, I think, simple and gorgeous. I think that the car selection is great. The way that they design the open world is great. The way that they, like, it does things differently than Underground does. It does things differently than Midnight Club 3 does. And I think that, you saw that all these different developers had their own takes on it. And that was the great thing about it. Every single game was different. And they all had different experiences. And it was all just it could be a great time for anyone. And we're just not going to see that again, guys. So if you're really curious, the racing genre is gone, really. It's not existing the way that it should be. And that's just disappointing as hell. So guys, thanks for listening. Long video, but stay tuned for more content. I'm Brian Swan. Thanks for listening.